Hello and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be offering to you my spoiler-filled review and initial thoughts and impressions on the newly released Netflix Transformers War for Cybertron trilogy Chapter 1 Siege. This series literally just debuted a few hours ago on Netflix and already I have binged all 6 episodes of the show in order to offer you a brand new review of the series. Now in this review I will be breaking the video up into certain parts, so to begin with we'll talk about the main characters and some of the standout characters that I found really had an impact on me. We will also be talking about the positives and of course the negatives. We'll be talking about some of the shock moments in the show, and believe me there are actually quite a few of shock moments, and then we'll also be discussing the future of the Netflix War for Cybertron trilogy and where I think that they're going to potentially take the show next. So to begin with, let's talk about some of the main and standout characters. So of course the first character that we have to talk about is Optimus Prime. Now Optimus Prime in this Netflix show I was quite divided on, to be honest with you. From the first episode I was really quite split down the middle on what I thought of him. In the first episode where Optimus rescues both Bumblebee and Wheeljack, he gets absolutely destroyed by Megatron. Megatron absolutely beats him to a pulp and he just doesn't stand a chance going up against him, and I really didn't like that about Optimus whatsoever. He didn't even throw a punch at Megatron. Megatron was just completely destroying him, and if it wasn't for a distraction I'm pretty sure that Megatron would have finished Optimus off there and then. So that is something that was really unfortunate straight off the offset, is that I think that Optimus throughout the entire series wasn't depicted as we know him. This is probably the weakest interpretation I've ever seen for Optimus Prime, and it's something that I really do hope they improve upon during Earthrise. Now it is hinted at during the show that the Autobots are not fighters. Optimus says that quite a lot, especially to Elita 1. He states that none of us wanted this war, we're all just fighting in order to survive. So I did quite like that aspect, but just seeing Optimus so weak, and quite honestly to see him have the fighting skill of just an Autobot scout, really wasn't that too appealing to me. I also wasn't a fan of the voice acting in this show. Now that's no hate to the actual voice actors, of course they're only working with what they've got and what they're told to do by the studios, but I just thought that if they were to replace Peter Cullen as Optimus Prime, I really think that the voice actor should have put his own spin on a version of Optimus. This to me sounded as if though it was a really bad impersonation of Optimus Prime, and I don't think that it really resonated well. From some of the reactions I've seen from fans, a lot of people aren't happy with the voice acting throughout the show and are really not happy with how the voice acting was handled there with Optimus. So out of all of the characters, it is unfortunate to say, but I think that Optimus Prime is probably the most poorly handled character throughout the show. I really didn't like his arc. I didn't like the fact that he was very early on depicted as this weak leader. All the Autobots would constantly question his authority. You had Elita 1 consistently questioning his decision choices, and Ultra Magnus even in the end went behind Optimus's back in order to create an allegiance with the Decepticons. I really didn't like that aspect. I really do wish that Optimus was more of a proud, authoritative leader, whereas in this show he was depicted as being rather weak, and that his commands didn't really resonate well with the rest of the Autobots. Moving on to the second main character, we of course have Megatron. Now I actually loved Megatron within this show, and he does actually have quite an awesome story arc. So at the beginning of the series you do see that there is this almost negotiable side to Megatron where he actually offers a treaty with Optimus and the Autobots. He states that if they just join sides that the war will be called off and that there will be no more fighting, and I did quite like that, and there was considerable attempts with Megatron trying to actually win over the Autobots to join the Decepticons. However, of course Optimus was never going to have any of that. I did really like the diversity between the Autobots and the Decepticons. There were quite a few instances where I was thinking perhaps we should side with the Decepticons instead of siding with the Autobots, as both of them really and truly seem to be fighting for the same thing. It's just that they are very mixed in terms of their communications, so if they could only just talk it out, I'm sure that they would have resolved it, but that was quite nice. And then as the show progresses you begin to see Megatron take a slightly darker turn, especially with Ultra Magnus, and we'll get on to that later on in the show. As soon as Ultra Magnus is incorporated into the mix, Megatron really does go on a downward spiral into being the very menacing Decepticon leader. I really did like how he was depicted in the show. All of the Decepticons seemed to fear him, and any of the commands that he would state had to be carried out by his fellow Decepticons, which was something that we never saw with Optimus Prime really. I did also really enjoy the voice acting that came from Megatron. I thought that his voice actor was leaps and bounds better than that of Optimus Prime. The voice actor who voiced Megatron really did put his own spin on it, and I just thought that he was perfect for the role. Now turning on to some of the characters that stood out to me the most, I've got to say that Jetfire made a very lasting impression on me. Now, he wasn't my favourite character out of the entire show, but he has one of the best story arcs, starting off as the Decepticon and then towards the end of the series slowly turning to the Autobot side after seeing how manipulative and how deceiving Megatron is. I thought that was really great. A great story arc. He was the commander of the Seekers. You had Starscream consistently questioning Jetfire on his loyalties to the Decepticons, and you saw very early on in the show, especially when they did capture Wheeljack and Bumblebee, how Jetfire wasn't necessarily so keen to execute the Autobots straight off the offset, which was the complete polar opposite to that of Starscream. Starscream was so ruthless, he just wanted to get the job done, wanted to execute all the Autobots, so the story arc for Jetfire was actually really awesome, and he was one of my favourite characters to come out of the show overall. Another character that I actually really enjoyed was Red Alert. Now, before going into the series, I had no idea who Red Alert was, but you really saw this very compassionate side to him, and I absolutely loved how he was just helping as many Autobots as he possibly could. He was really and truly the only Autobot medic, and I loved that he was just completely thrown into this war and really had to adapt very quickly to his surroundings. So Red Alert for me was one of the standout characters, but the best character in my opinion was Impactor. Now, I know that's probably going to surprise a lot of you, but I absolutely loved Impactor within this show. He also has, I think, the best story arc out of all of the characters. Initially starting off as a Decepticon and staying a Decepticon throughout the entire battle. He always states that I am a Decepticon, but I swore by myself many years ago that I would defend those who couldn't. I thought that was so awesome. He had such a great character. He was indeed rescued by Ratchet, as initially he was presumed to be dead after they flanked the Autobots, and it did backfire on them. Impactor was really badly damaged, but Ratchet rescued him, patched him up, and Impactor was loyal to Ratchet until the end and actually sacrificed himself in order to save Ratchet, which was unfortunate as Impactor was my favourite character from the show, but I just thought that it wrapped his story arc up so nicely. So Impactor for me is definitely one of the standout characters. Another character that was quite a standout for me was Mirage. I wasn't expecting Mirage to have quite as much of a presence as he did, and he had some of the best action sequences throughout the course of the series. One of the more noticeable ones was when he almost had this Doctor Strange effect where he split up into multiple different versions of himself and you didn't know which one was the original Mirage, and he was attacking all of the Decepticons. I thought that was an awesome effect and created for a really fun battle sequence. I also love the scene where he shielded the entire space bridge. I thought that was really nicely done. He almost sacrificed himself by doing that, which just shows how committed he was to the Autobot cause, and I did like how he had that almost back and forth feud with Impactor. Really nice character there. Elita 1 was also one of the standout characters for me. Now, to be honest with you, I was quite let down with Elita 1. However, she did considerably grow on me throughout the course of the series, particularly in the final episode. To begin with, I really didn't like how she would consistently question Optimus Prime. I do believe that it is alluded in the series that they are close, but she just kept rolling her eyes up at him. She didn't seem to take anything that he was saying seriously, and any tactical plans that he would put forward, she would consistently shoot him down, which I just didn't like about the character. She came across as too arrogant for me, and really and truly only had a couple of cool action sequences. I really did like when she acted as a sniper and she blasted Megatron's hand and stopped him from slicing Optimus with his blade. That was probably one of her standout scenes. We never see her transform in the show, which is unfortunate, but it would be quite nice to see her perhaps in Earthrise and to see that character develop slightly further. Another character which actually has one of the major roles within the series, and of course this character is Bumblebee. He starts off the series with not aligning himself with either the Autobots or the Decepticons, which was quite an interesting decision, as of course Bumblebee has always been infiltrated with the Autobots, but here in this series it's almost as if though he's a mercenary. He works for the Decepticons on certain jobs and then works for the Autobots in certain tasks. At the end of the day, he's only really there to get paid, and that's all he cares about. Towards the end of the show though, he does begin to slowly infiltrate himself with the Autobots and does eventually leave with the Autobots, so I do imagine that in the next series he will definitely take the Autobot name, but I just thought that that was rather a obscure choice for them to go with, as I've always known Bumblebee to be an Autobot. He also does absorb the Alpha Trion Protocol, so once again Bumblebee was one of the main characters due to the plot point that the Alpha Trion Protocol actually leads the Autobots, I believe it's to the Allspark, so they need the information that Bumblebee has in order to locate that. So I thought that that was quite a nice idea, and once again it makes Bumblebee the centre character, as he always really and truly has been throughout various Transformers media. Moving on now to some of the positives of the show, I thought that the show had amazing visuals. That was something that was blowing me away with every single episode. I absolutely loved how each of the characters looked almost identical to their action figure form. I thought that was so nicely done. They were made to look rather grubby, really awesome and very realistic. I thought that the way that they designed the overall characters within this show was completely different to anything that I'd seen from various other animations, and this is dubbed as being an anime, so I do think that they were intending to separate themselves from some of the previous animations, but quite honestly I think that the designs of the characters were some of the best. The only issues that I had with some of the designs of the characters was that they reused a lot of the Autobots and Decepticons as clones. I noticed that there were considerable repainted versions of Cog throughout the show, as well as Sideswipe, and there was even some repaints of Ironhide, which threw you off ever so slightly, and there was even a repaint of Chromia, which was supposed to be Moonracer, and that was something that at times could become fairly confusing, as some of the colours were not so different to that of the main characters, so that was something that I hope that we see improved in the future. There were many Seekers within this show, all of which were mainly unnamed. I also thought that the scenery and the setting of Cybertron was really nicely done. The designs of the weapons, the character designs, the backdrop, everything I thought was really nicely done, so I have no problems with the overall design of the show. I think that the designs are very faithful to the G1 source material and gave us a really refreshed and updated look of them. Another positive that I have is that there was a great selection of main characters within this show. There were really all of the main characters that you would expect. Some characters that I was surprised not to see within the show were Springer. I was really anticipating Springer to actually show up in the show, and I was actually quite surprised to see RC present within the show as well. She does make quite a few appearances throughout the show, mainly in the final 2 episodes, but she is rather present, which was quite surprising as I did expect her to appear in Earthrise. So overall for characters, I thought that we had a great selection. Now turning to the negatives, I've stated previously the voice acting is definitely a negative for me. That's no disrespect to the voice actors, there was just some voices that were so off, and some of them sounded rather generic. There were no voice actors that really stood out to me and really made the characters their own. I did quite like Wheeljack's voice actor, Megatron's was also really nicely done, and I did think that Starscream's was also one of the better ones, but Shockwave's, I really don't know where they were going with Shockwave's voice actor. He sounded more like a movie version of Starscream. I've previously stated about Optimus Prime, I really do think that they should change the voice actor, or at least change the way that the voice actor approaches the script in Earthrise. His voice just completely threw me off and distanced itself so much from the character. Now that's probably because I'm more familiar with Peter Cullen voicing Optimus Prime, but there have been various other Transformers medias where they've managed to get a new voice actor in and they've made the character their own. I didn't feel like that was the case with this version of Optimus. He really did sound to me as if though he was an impersonator. Another thing that got on my nerves and was a negative was how repetitive some of the dialogue was. There were various times throughout the show where I could have sworn I'd heard a certain phrase repeated 5 or 10 or 15 times. They did tend to repeat quite a lot, and I think that's probably so that they could get the story across to younger viewers of the show, but for someone who is following it really closely, it did definitely become rather repetitive, and is something that once again I do hope that they work on in the future. I also thought that the overall runtime of the show was too short. This series is only 6 episodes long, with only around 20 to 23 minute episodes, and some of the scenes and some of the actual story did feel rather rushed. I feel as if though if they were to have spreaded it out like the Transformers Prime series, we would have got a much more developed series, and a series that would have made a little bit more sense. There were some certain aspects of the show that I found to be rather rushed and didn't really understand the overall significance to, and I think with a longer series we could have seen more character development from some of the characters. I would have loved to have seen more backstory between the Fembots. I would have loved to have seen more from Ratchet, as he actually had a really cool story arc as well within the show, and some characters like the main characters such as Soundwave, Shockwave and Ironhide were really and truly pushed to the back. We don't really get too many memorable scenes with those characters, which is unfortunate as I thought that they were going to get quite a significant amount of screen time. Now turning to some of the shocking moments of the show, I'm going to be discussing with you some of the deaths. So if you don't want to know any of the pivotal spoilers to the show, I recommend that you either skip this section or watch the series and come back to this review. So some of the deaths that really did surprise me, not only for their shock factor, but for their gruesome nature, was of course Thundercracker. Very early on in the show, Thundercracker does actually get decapitated by Optimus Prime when he fires him with his blaster, which I was really surprised that his head literally just popped off really clean and easily and he died. We also do get Spinister, who is impaled by a fight. I believe it's with Optimus Prime. He gets thrown and this huge spike stabs him right through the chest, and subsequently he does die. He was a character that I was looking forward to seeing developed more in the show, but unfortunately he is once again killed off very early on. Another character that I was very surprised to see die was Moonracer. As stated, I did initially believe it was Chromia, so I was rather shocked at first, but then I realised when Optimus stated that it was Moonracer, I wasn't so shocked, but she is essentially dismembered by some of the Decepticons Decepticon zombies. She gets her arms and her legs pulled off, and it's just a torso and a head that is left. So I thought that was a rather gruesome death, and was quite honestly fairly shocking. I didn't expect her to die so soon, and in such a gruesome way. Now, one of the most gruesome and shocking deaths of the show was Ultra Magnus. Now, he's actually gunned down by Megatron, which I expected, but then they reuse his body, his corpse, as a vessel in order to send the virus throughout Cybertron, and it is actually a really gruesome imagery. Ultra Magnus's corpse is strung up by all of these different tendrils, he's dead, and Shockwave is using his body as a vessel in order to send out the virus. If you've seen the show, you'll know what I'm talking about, and that was actually one of the more shocking moments of the series, and seeing as how much of a main character Ultra Magnus is, I wasn't expecting them to kill him off in such a gruesome and so early on. Another one of the shocking moments for me was Alpha Trion with Bumblebee. I really wasn't expecting to see a cameo from Alpha Trion. Now, it's not the Alpha Trion, it does appear as if though it's Alpha Trion's ghost, but he is talking to Bumblebee throughout the show when Bumblebee goes into almost this dreamlike state, and that was a really nice cameo. That was something that surprised me and just connected the show to various other Transformers medias. I was really glad that they did put Alpha Trion in there, and from what we could see from his design, it was a really awesome design, so I do hope that Hasbro take the design and turn it into an action figure. Another surprising moment for me was Omega Supreme. When Omega Supreme shows up during the final battle, I was so surprised, as Optimus Prime actually appeals to the Guardians, of which look like Omega Supreme earlier on in the show, and they state that they don't want anything to do with this war. However, there is one Guardian that you can see throughout the shot that looks as if though he's taking on board what Optimus says, and that must have been Omega Supreme, as he busts out of the ground and just absolutely annihilates the Decepticon forces. He was using his arm to literally just destroy all of the Tetrajet Seekers. The only criticism I had with Omega Supreme was the voice acting. Once again, I didn't think the voice actor suited Omega Supreme whatsoever. So in the future, if Omega Supreme does show up, I do hope that that is something that they perfect. Now, turning to the future of the show. If you don't want any spoilers, once again, please do turn off. Now, towards the final act of the 6th episode, the Autobots do board the Ark, and they do leave via the space bridge. Now, leaving behind them Elita 1, Chromia, Jetfire, Red Alert, and the Decepticons. They are all left on Cybertron with the rest of the Autobots in the Ark. So they leave through the Ark, and throughout the series it is hinted that Optimus is taking the Allspark to somewhere else. He wants to get the Allspark off of Cybertron, and that somewhere else is of course Earth, and that is confirmed by the Earthrise toy line. So of course I believe that that's going to take place on Earth, and towards some of the closing moments of the show, Teletran 1 does indeed activate, at least it looks as if though it's Teletran 1, in order to alert the Autobots that there is an unidentified aircraft following behind them. So that is of course the Nemesis with the Decepticons on board. So whether or not they gun the Autobots down and they crash land on Earth and then they fight for the Allspark on Earth is yet to be seen. However, that is definitely where I believe the show will carry on next. There is also a very small cameo from Astro Train. When Teletran 1 is first activated, you can see Astro Train outside the Ark, and then he just completely disappears. Now, I don't believe they've put that in for no reason whatsoever. I believe that Astro Train is actually somewhere on the Ark and sends the call out to the Decepticons in order for them to track the Ark. So that's definitely where I think we'll see the next chapter pick up, and to me that overall concept does seem fairly promising. So that just about wraps up everything I have to say for the new Transformers Netflix War for Cybertron Trilogy Chapter 1. Overall, in terms of a rating, I would say that I give this show roughly a 6 out of 10. Now, that's not to say that it's a bad show. I certainly enjoyed it. However, there are certain aspects of the show that I think really and truly should have been improved upon before the show went on air. And if they do make some slight tweaks to the voice acting and to some of the tonal balances and just to the runtime in general, I really do think we are looking for a very promising second chapter. So I really do hope that you enjoyed my discussion video, review, and thoughts on the new Transformers Netflix Siege show. If you did enjoy this video, please do let me know down in the comment section below, and also be sure to let me know some of your thoughts and feelings on the show also down in the comments. I thank you for watching this rather long video, and if you did stick around to the end, I thank you so much for doing so, and until my next video, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.